Most of the time, when people think about the origins of economic thought, they jump straight to Adam Smith, Karl Marx, or maybe Aristotle, if they paid attention in school. But there's a quieter truth hiding in the medieval world, a truth Western history rarely teaches. Nearly 1,000 years ago, long before capitalism or central banks existed, a Muslim scholar issued a warning that still echoes across every financial crisis today. He said that when money loses its moral compass, societies rot from the inside out. And judging by the world we live in, he might have understood us a lot better than we think. Welcome to The Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. To understand Al-Ghazali, one of the most influential thinkers of the Islamic Golden Age, you have to imagine a world that looked both familiar and foreign. The years around 1100 CE, Europe is fragmented and poor, still crawling out of the wreckage of the early Middle Ages. Meanwhile, the Islamic world stretches from Al-Andalus in Spain to Persia and beyond. Its cities are wealthy, crowded, sophisticated. Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, these are financial and intellectual powerhouses. Trade routes pulse with caravans carrying silk, spices, textiles, and silver. Scholars debate philosophy, law, astronomy, medicine. The markets are busy, the empire is rich, and wealth is transforming society faster than anyone can fully understand. In this world of booming commerce and rising inequality, a scholar named Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali emerges, part philosopher, part jurist, part theologian, part critic. Think of him as the kind of thinker who could explain both the purpose of the soul and the purpose of a currency system without blinking. Born in 1058 in Persia, Al-Ghazali rose quickly through the intellectual ranks. By his mid-30s, he held one of the most prestigious teaching positions in the Islamic world. But what made him unique wasn't his prestige, it was his unwillingness to accept the status quo. He saw a world where wealth was growing, markets were expanding, and yet something felt off. A society obsessed with money but drifting away from meaning. An economy thriving outwardly but decaying inwardly. You don't have to try hard to see the modern parallel. Al-Ghazali began asking a question few had dared to ask. What happens when a civilization gets rich faster than it gets wise? And to answer it, he turned his focus to the concept of money itself. This is the part that surprises most Western viewers. Al-Ghazali wasn't just a religious thinker, he was one of the earliest philosophers to analyze money in moral and systemic terms. Where Aristotle saw money as a practical invention, and later economists analyzed it mathematically, Al-Ghazali examined its psychological and spiritual impact on a society. He looked at how money shapes behavior, incentives, trust, and ultimately the fate of nations. To understand his economic ideas, you first need to understand how he saw money at its core. For Al-Ghazali, money was not meant to be worshipped, hoarded, or used as a status symbol. It was a tool, nothing more, a facilitator of exchange. He compared money to a mirror. A mirror has no value on its own. Its worth comes from what it reflects. Money is the same. Its power lies not in the gold or silver itself, but in what it allows people to trade, build, and cooperate. It's an idea modern economists like to claim as their own, but Al-Ghazali was writing it in the 11th century, when many Europeans still understood wealth mainly as land or loot. And from this foundation emerged one of his most important insights. Hoarded money is dead money. To him, wealth locked away in chests, hidden in rooms, or buried in courtyards wasn't just useless, it was socially destructive. Idle wealth doesn't circulate. It doesn't feed workers, fund trade, or support families. It strangles economic life. He described it as freezing the bloodstream of society, a line that could easily appear in any modern critique of inequality. But Al-Ghazali wasn't simply complaining about greed. His argument was systemic. When the wealthy hoard money, they create scarcity, not because resources are lacking, but because circulation is blocked. Prices distort, markets break down, people suffer. This critique leads to his next major idea. Speculation destroys trust. Al-Ghazali had no patience for merchants who manipulated prices, created artificial shortages, or exploited crises for profit. He saw speculative behavior not as clever strategy, but as moral corruption. Profit without contribution. Whoever profits from the suffering of others, he wrote, profits from corruption. And corruption, in his view, was a contagion. Once it takes hold, it spreads through markets, institutions, and eventually the entire society. If this sounds like a commentary on modern financial bubbles, predatory lending, or crisis profiteering, well, it is, just written 900 years earlier. But Al-Ghazali wasn't anti-profit. He wasn't anti-business. He wasn't calling for monasteries or poverty vows. He believed in trade strongly. He believed markets were natural and necessary. He believed wealth could be meaningful and even noble. His real target was dishonest trade. Cheating, lying, using false weights, concealing defects in products, or manipulating information. He believed that markets function only when the participants trust one another. And once trust collapses, the economy collapses right behind it. In that sense, he was one of the earliest thinkers to describe what modern economists now call transaction costs, information asymmetry, and moral hazard, just without the jargon. Another of his key insights was the value of labor. He argued that work was inherently dignified, while unearned wealth was spiritually dangerous. To him, money earned through effort built character, while money accumulated through manipulation rotted it. That might sound moralizing, but the logic was practical. Societies grow strong when people contribute. They grow weak when people exploit. But Al-Ghazali didn't stop with individuals. He also delivered one of the earliest critiques of state intervention in currency. Medieval rulers, like many modern ones, often diluted gold or silver coins to stretch their budgets, effectively taxing people through stealth inflation. Al-Ghazali condemned this practice outright. To him, debasing currency was theft. It eroded trust in the market. It punished the poor who received weaker coins. It destabilized the financial system from the top down. He believed the state had a role in maintaining fair markets, but that role was limited. Leaders should protect the economy, not manipulate it for short-term gain. He warned that unjust rulers destroy prosperity faster than any outside enemy. And once again, the modern parallel doesn't require explanation. Al-Ghazali's warnings about rulers did not emerge from abstract theory, but from watching the real behavior of real states. In his lifetime, political fragmentation was increasing, dynasties fought for legitimacy, local governors pushed for more revenue, and as always, when rulers felt their grip on society slipping, the very first place they tightened their hands was the economy. Some raised taxes to painful levels. Others manipulated coinage to stretch their budgets. Some seized merchant assets, while others borrowed recklessly and left future generations to deal with the consequences. None of these tactics were new, and none of them, in Al-Ghazali's eyes, solved the underlying problem. He believed corruption at the top radiated downward like a poison. When a ruler cheated his people, the merchants felt justified in cheating their customers. When institutions failed to act with integrity, individuals no longer saw any reason to act with responsibility. The entire economic order, from the palace treasury to the neighborhood market, became a chain reaction of distrust. His conclusion was stark, but simple. A society can survive poverty, but it cannot survive corruption. Economic collapse is rarely about running out of money or resources. It is about the breakdown of trust, the invisible glue that holds every transaction, every contract, every currency, and every institution together. When that trust erodes, even the wealthiest nation becomes fragile. From this perspective, his ideas about currency make sense. To Al-Ghazali, currency stability depended entirely on honesty. Debasement of coinage, diluting gold or silver content, wasn't just poor policy. It was deception. It was betrayal. A ruler who tampered with currency was not being clever. He was stealing from his own people in slow motion. What looked like a minor alteration to a coin's purity was, to Al-Ghazali, the beginning of financial rot. He predicted that if states manipulated currency too often, the population would eventually lose trust, abandon the local coin, and start using stronger foreign currencies instead. 1,000 years later, these dynamics played out in Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina, and every modern case where people flee their own money because they no longer trust the promises behind it. Meanwhile, inflation debates and anxieties in the 21st century reflect exactly what this medieval scholar understood, that money is ultimately a belief system, and once people stop believing, the system stops functioning. But Al-Ghazali's view of finance went beyond currency and taxation. He understood something deeper about human nature. People hoard out of fear. They speculate out of greed. They cheat when they think they can get away with it. They manipulate money because money is easy to manipulate. They rationalize unethical profits because everyone else is doing the same. And when a society reaches the point where exploitation becomes normal, collapse is already underway. This belief guided one of his most powerful insights. You cannot fix an economy without fixing the incentives that shape human behavior. Well, laws matter and markets matter, but behind them all are people making choices driven by emotion, ambition, fear, and desire. Unless a society's systems align those incentives toward productive, honest behavior, the economy will drift toward corruption, instability, and self-destruction. This is why Al-Ghazali placed so much emphasis on the moral dimension of wealth. To him, wealth without responsibility was not just spiritually dangerous, it was a threat to the common good. He believed wealth was not inherently bad, it was simply incomplete without purpose. A society grows strong when individuals contribute more than they extract, when the drive to accumulate is balanced by the duty to uplift. But when wealth becomes detached from social responsibility, when the pursuit of profit ignores the welfare of the community, the system becomes brittle. A selfish society eventually collapses under its own weight, and once it collapses, everyone pays, including the wealthy who thought they were immune. Civilizations rise when people understand balance. They fall when that balance snaps. And that brings us directly into the modern world, a world where Al-Ghazali's insights feel less like medieval philosophy and more like a diagnostic report of our current age. We live in a global economy where money moves faster than meaning, where wealth inequality approaches levels not seen in centuries, where markets often reward speculation over contribution, where trust in institutions declines year after year, where inflation quietly erodes purchasing power, and where financial bubbles grow, burst, and grow again with predictable regularity. Everywhere you look, there are echoes of the very problems Al-Ghazali described, playing out on a global scale. His critique of hoarding mirrors today's debates about billionaires, offshore accounts, and concentrated wealth. His warnings about speculation resemble concerns over housing crises, crypto volatility, shadow banking, and predatory markets. His condemnation of manipulated currency strikes at the heart of today's monetary policy debates. And his belief that trust is the foundation of prosperity explains why nations with stable institutions, honest courts, predictable regulations, transparent governance enjoy stronger currencies and more resilient economies. What strikes modern readers is how little the world has changed. The technology is different, the markets are faster, the scale is global instead of regional, but the underlying human behaviors are the same. Al-Ghazali would likely look at our current system, at runaway debt, speculative frenzies, widening inequality, political gridlock, and institutional distrust, and say exactly what he wrote 1,000 years ago. Where justice is lost, prosperity cannot remain. It's an uncomfortable truth. Economies don't collapse because the numbers stop adding up. They collapse because the people inside the system stop trusting each other. They collapse because the incentives reward the wrong behaviors. They collapse because institutions fail to uphold the fairness that makes markets possible. Human emotion, human fear, human greed, human shortcuts. These, not abstract economic formulas, are what push civilizations toward crisis. Al-Ghazali wasn't preaching religion, he was describing reality. He understood something economists often struggle to admit, that money is not a mechanical object. It is a moral ecosystem. And when the moral framework disintegrates, the financial system follows right behind it. That's why his ideas matter today. In an era defined by record debt, speculative excess, institutional mistrust, and financial anxiety, his central message becomes a survival principle. If money becomes detached from morality, the system will eventually break. Understanding that idea isn't just financial education, it's financial protection. Because history doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it'll crush you all the same. And if this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.